Hi, everybody. I am Jess Jacobs. I am the moderator of this panel, also an actor, a writer, and a producer. I'm so unbelievably honored to be here and thrilled that you all are joining us at this year's Repro Film Fest, because storytelling has the power to change the world. And there are way too many attacks on reproductive freedoms these days. And so honored to be able to gather together, both to experience the joy and to, raise arms. So thank you for being here. Whether you're returning or if you're joining us for the first time this year, thrilled to have you with us. Through knowledge, intention, and action, Repro is actually the only film festival in the world that is dedicated to reproductive justice, advocating for inclusive reproductive health care, justice, and bodily autonomy for women, cis, trans, and non-binary alike. When you purchase tickets and donate to Repro, you have become an active participant of change, as all of the net ticket sales support our three beneficiary organizations. One is Black Women's Health Imperative, second is the Lilith Fund, and the third is No More Secrets. You can access our films from anywhere in the United States, and you can get all the info that you need at reprofilmfest.com. We would like to thank all of our sponsors, including Bloomberg Philanthropies, Stober Lafer Foundation, the Lori M. Tisch Illumination Fund, and the Shepherd Foundation. Welcome to our call to action roundtable discussion with Repro Shorts filmmakers on the importance of representation of reproductive justice in the media. I am really so thrilled to introduce Maya Cueva. She's the director and producer of Ale Libre. Second is Aurora Brockman, the director, producer, cinematographer, and editor of The Gallery That Destroys All Shame. And Sarah Emma Friedland, the director, writer, producer, and editor of In Accordance With. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. The first question that I will toss at all of you is a little bit about your background. And Maya, why don't we start with you? How did you come to filmmaking? Sort of where are you coming from as a creator?
Hi, well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be a part of this festival. I am originally from the Bay Area. I grew up in Berkeley, California. I am a Latina filmmaker, still based here. And I really came into filmmaking actually through radio. I started in high school at what used to be known as youth radio, but is now known as Wire Media. And that's really where I learned like all the ins and outs of broadcast radio and like content and really being a media maker. And it was actually there that a really horrible incident happened at a local high school here in the Bay Area. It was actually a rape that happened at a high school. But what I was seeing was that the media was often portraying this area, it's Richmond, California, as a place that was almost like glorified this type of violence. And so it was really kind of perpetuating these very racist stereotypes of the city. And I really felt like, okay, if I want to be a media maker, I have to be an intentional one, right? Like I really want to challenge these kind of mainstream media perceptions of communities like my own. So it was from there that I, started working in radio, and then I went to Ithaca College and I studied documentary studies and production. And that's where I made my first short film that's following a traveling abortion doctor, actually, who travels from New Mexico to Texas. So my work has really, really always aligned with reproductive justice, healthcare, as well as immigration rights. So I'm now still consider myself an emerging filmmaker, but I just finished up my first feature documentary called On the Divide. And this is my short, Ale Libre. So very excited to be here.
Fabulous. Congratulations on both pieces. Aurora, I will ask you the same question.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and that's where I grew up, but I no longer live there now. Phoenix was very conservative when I was growing up, and it was very strange being like the only Black person like in any space I was ever in, so I decided that wasn't the home for me. I came to documentary film not actually from as like a love of film, although I always did love film and I was always very creative, but I I started in psychology, and I studied psychology in undergrad, and I thought I was going to be a therapist, and I worked in like a research psychology setting for a long time. And I think what drew me to psychology was that I was like really curious about understanding myself better and understanding the people around me. And psychology was like this very clinical way of approaching that understanding and that exploration. And then I found documentary to be this much more sort of like organic, expressive kind of way of doing that same thing. And all of my films for me come from like something within me that I need to work through, or that is like troubling me or bringing me joy, or it always comes back to like, what do I need to understand better for myself? And it's my hope that when people watch my films, that they're sort of taken on that same journey that I've gone through as a filmmaker, as I've made it, and the journey that I've come through of understanding that's grown through the process of making the film, and that sort of I shepherd audiences with me, but sometimes it almost sounds a little selfish, like I'm really making them for me. But I also feel like documentary is this field that began really as sort of like a white supremacist tool to like show communities of color and and give them like this strange exoticized view. And I think as a woman, as a person of color, and I also identify as a queer person, making films from my perspective and films that really resonate with me first and foremost, I think that that's like a powerful thing, and that other people like me who watch the film feel really seen. So yeah, that's sort of how I came to filmmaking. And I also have to say that I'm the co-director of the film, so there's another co-director who can't be here with us, but so she also brings her own perspective to the film as well.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's really, I mean, it's so beautiful to be able to make something from your own lens that like is something that you're really exploring. And if you're exploring it, for sure, there are other people that are asking those same questions. So yeah, it's just such a gorgeous approach. Thanks, Aurora. Sarah, a little bit about you and your background.
Well, thank you again for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And I also want to just give a little credit to my co-director, Alessandra Lacarosa, who isn't here today, and also Meerkat Media Collective, who I made this film with. So much like Aurora, I actually started off in a really different place. I wanted to do radical women's health, and I wanted to be a midwife. So very much in line with why we're all here. So I was in undergrad, and I ended up studying abroad in Cuba for a couple of years, and doing kind of like studying women's health in Cuba, and potentially planning on going to med school there. And while I was there, I took a film course with this wonderful professor, Pedro Noa, and like it just totally blew my mind and changed my course forever. So kind of flash forward 20 years now, this is the first film that I've made that have kind of brought those two things together. So radical women's health, reproductive justice, and filmmaking. And it's also my first fiction film, although it's really based in documentary content. And I guess I would say that my interest in filmmaking and what kind of blew me away about studying film in Cuba was just like this ability to really translate the world around us in creative, tangible, artistic, and really kind of like experimental and radical ways. And that's what I tried to bring into my work. And yeah, since making this film, I've made a couple other films that are also about women's health and reproductive justice. I'm making a film about infertility right now, and I also just finished a film about domestic violence. And then my other big project that I'm working on, which I'm co-directing with a Palestinian journalist, Rami Yunus, is called Lit in Exile, and it's a feature documentary, which is a hybrid feature, also kind of science fiction-y, like in accordance with. So I'm really interested in blending genres and being playful and being experimental, but also like reaching people in a political and I guess very leftist way.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Well, and unfortunately, reproductive justice is a very leftist position, which, really always kind of surprises me how deep that goes. Okay, so for all of you, you have made these absolutely stunning films. I was saying to the founders of the festival, I got goosebumps multiple times watching all of your movies. They're just so beautiful. They're so well done. They're so striking, such unique perspectives. And I think it would be really great to get to dive a little bit into what the story is behind making the film. So how you came to these stories. And then, as much as you want to share a little bit about your filmmaking process too, I'm sure that would be of interest. So I'm going to switch up the order a little bit. Aurora, we'll jump in with you. Whatever sort of how did you come to this story?
Yeah, so my co-director Jesse Zinn and I sort of we knew that we both were interested in making a film that had something to do with like reproductive health. And I had a friend who had invited me to this class. She was like, there's this class. She was like, well, actually, no, I think I went over to dinner. This is a couple years ago. I went to her house for dinner, and she was like, I just did the most amazing thing this weekend. And I was like, okay, what did you do? And she was like, I was in this class where basically like we all looked into each other's vaginas and we like talked about our experiences with our vaginas, and we learned how to use a speculum. And I've like never felt like more empowered and like just sort of more humbled. And like she was just like gushing about this experience she's had. She was like, and there were so many different kinds of people. There were sex workers, there were mothers, there were trans people, there were all these different, and she was like, it was amazing. And she was like, there's one happening next week. Do you want to go? And I was like, and I did not go. I was like, that sounds like a lot. I was very intrigued, but I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to look into other people's vaginas or look into my own in a public space. So I declined. And then like a year passes and my friend and I, my co-director, are talking about wanting to make a film, and I recall this amazing class that my friend had told me about. And I was like, this sounds just like this could be an incredible experience to document. And, but I also knew that was a huge ask. Like to find a group of people that were going to be comfortable enough to have us be in this like unbelievably vulnerable and intimate space with them. I knew that was going to be really difficult, and I reached out to the woman who runs the class. It was this amazing woman named Pamela, and she was like a little skeptical, honestly. Understandably. She's like, really, like, my goal first and foremost is like to protect the people that attend my workshop. And she was like, all my friends tell me not to trust documentary filmmakers, so I'm not sure if I'm going to trust you. But we, spent some time trying to gain her trust. And the day we went to shoot the film, we had never witnessed the class before. We didn't know what was going to happen. We'd never been there. We also had never met any of the attendants of the class. They had been informed that it was going to be filmed, but they were not people who came to a class because they wanted to be participants in a documentary. They came to this class hoping to participate, and then were informed, like, just so you know, this one, there's going to be a documentary crew there. And so we had to have a lot of conversations, me and my co-director, about consent, like, first and foremost. Consent's always like a tricky thing in documentary, but I think this consent kind of overlaps with like consent, like sexual consent too, because we're documenting people's like intimate bodies, and the idea that like consent is like a fluid thing that can be, given and retracted at any time. And we never wanted, because we're there with the camera, for them to somehow feel like they're now obligated to allow us to film their body, or allow us to record their stories. So we had to really like very quickly, having like literally just arrived there, like as we met, when we met them, like we were there with the cameras, meeting them right as we were going to shoot. So finding ways to establish that trust and checking in constantly, basically, that like are you comfortable, like at every moment allowing people to have the opportunity to opt out, And so that was something that was like very tricky to navigate. And it's really interesting because at the beginning we had everyone indicate like, hey, what are you comfortable with? Like, are you comfortable with full nudity, partial nudity? Do you want to be filmed at all? And, you know, there's a variety of people that had different preferences. And by the end of the film, or by the end of the shooting process, I think it was probably partly because, you know, it ended up being a really, really positive experience, and partly because it's such an empowering, like, thing to be a part of. There are a bunch of women who came up to us who at the beginning of the night said, don't film any nudity. And they said, if you film my vagina, please put it in the film. They were like, I really want you to put my vagina in the film. That was awesome. Like, it was such a cool experience. And the teacher, Pam, came up to us and she was like, you know, I was so skeptical, but I'm so glad I allowed you guys to do this. Like, I am just, she had a really incredible experience. I think Jesse and I, it was super transformative. I'd never filmed like vaginas and vulvas before. I had never been in a class of other people showing their vaginas and vulvas. Like, I had never had an experience like this in my life. And it's actually really also a precious thing because we filmed this in February of 2020, and it was the last class they ever had because then the pandemic hit and they haven't been able to hold them since. So, our last class in person. So, so it was that was sort of the process of making it, and we wanted in the film it could just sort of capture the experience of being there and feeling like you're just a participant and you're not a voyeur there, because we didn't want it to be somehow like, we didn't want the act of filming to be an exploitative thing. We wanted you to feel like you're sort of like humbled and by having the privilege of being in the space. And so all of our sort of like choices just sort of like aesthetically were to sort of mimic like the perspective of a participant. And and then to sort of, by the end of the film, it gets a little bit like dreamy and surreal. And that was really just sort of the experience of like all these people's bodies on top of each other, peering into each other, like, and how surreal that moment was for us. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that. That's so beautiful. And I love that there's like the meta quality, like this sort of thing of like, we're filming this film about exploration and simultaneously like exploring and sort of like figuring out what that kind of interaction like really looks like and really feels like. So that's so beautiful. Maya, do you want to speak a little bit to how you came to Ale's story and what your filmmaking process was?
Yeah, definitely. Aurora, I really want to see your film, so I'm so excited about it. Sounds amazing. But yeah, I came across Ale's story in 2018. I was doing a fellowship at Latino USA, which is a show on NPR. It's a radio fellowship. And it's actually interesting because there's a lot of intersections with my feature film On the Divide and the short. But I came across a petition that a lot of reproductive justice organizers that I have worked with on the feature were sharing on social media. And the petition was calling for the immediate release of Alejandra Pablos from the Eloy Detention Center, where she was detained for a few months. And this was actually the second time she was detained. So I immediately looked into her, who she was. I just wanted to know everything about her, and actually came across a web series that she does that's called Brown and Bruja. And it's really, she always laughs that I love this, but it's really interesting because it talks everything about everything from reproductive health care to organizing to immigrant rights to also trash men and everything, it's just an amazing web series that she does with her friend, like brujeria and all these things. And then I learned all about how she's this incredible organizer and about how she was actually, detained because she got a DUI at first. So essentially, I did a radio story for Latino USA. It was a feature radio story, and I was able to talk to her for the first time while she was still in detention. So we had a phone call. And then from there, once that story was released, and she was actually released for the second time out of Eloy, it was actually her who contacted me and was like, "Hey, I'm actually looking to expand my story in a documentary form. Do you know anyone who makes documentaries. And I was like, yeah, actually I do. And I really wanted to do this anyways. So it was actually it's just a perfect situation. And what I've always really, tried to prioritize in creating this film is like making sure that Ale feels very comfortable along the way and feels like this is a collaborative experience, because, her story is very delicate and I don't want to cause like more harm, or put her in, her safety in more jeopardy. So I think like we've been able to really work out a relationship that's really based on trust. And I'm really lucky because I got a fellowship through the Jacob Burns Film Center, which is in Westchester, New York. It's called Creative Culture, and that was really how I was able to make this film, using, with the support of them and their resources. This film couldn't have been made. So yeah, so I'm very happy that it's out in the world now.
Yes, yeah. It's beautiful, and it's also so devastating when you get to the end and you're like, seriously, man, like, and that's the role of storytelling and the role of film. So yeah, just such a beautiful. And I'm actually curious. I'll ask a question after Sarah too, and Sarah, I'd be curious if this question resonates for you. But first, the experience of making the film, I know that you made it with a collective and a co-director. What did that experience look like? And how did you come to the story and the decision to make this sort of hybrid kind of feature documentary-esque kind of film?
Yeah, so I'm a member of this collective called the Meerkat Media Collective, and we are a 15-person collective based in New York City, and we share kind of resources and support each other, and it's non-hierarchical in structure. And we had a series that we started doing right after Trump got elected called Newsreels from the Resistance, where we were just making these very short kind of verite documentary pieces of protests that were happening around New York City in reaction to Trump and his policies. And it was an amazing process. It was a very collaborative process. Somebody would be like, oh, this is happening. I'm part of this group. We're doing this. And let's document it. And then in 15 minutes, we'd have 5 shooters, 1 person lined up to edit, somebody ready to push it out. And the whole thing would be turned around in 2 days. And it was so, it was almost like making an exquisite corpse, because there was really no real director for any of the projects, and we made a number of them. And I really loved it, and I really like making political work, but I'm also really interested in making political work that is radical in form and that uses kind of an experimental language. As somebody who has had 2 abortions, I was really wanting to do something on reproductive justice, and I kind of pitched this idea to the collective that was very much kind of coming from my brain, so different from the other newsreels that we had made that were more decentralized, I guess. But I pitched this idea that I wanted to make something where we could see the way that that bodies were legislated in space, that we could see how anti-choice laws and restrictions impact the way that pregnant people move through space. And so I had this idea to set it at a fictional border checkpoint and to use the actual language to write a script from these pamphlets that are part of mandatory state counseling, that are called Women's Right to Know pamphlets, that are just these really coercive, oftentimes medically incorrect pamphlets that are used to try to dissuade pregnant people from having abortions in various states. And so people got on board immediately. Alessandra Lacco Rosa, who is a fiction filmmaker and part of the collective, was like, I'm really interested in co-directing this with you. And I was like, great, because I have no idea what I'm doing because I make documentary. And so we started kind of putting the script together, and I just started combing through all of these Women's Rights to Know Act pamphlets, which you can find on State Department of Health websites, and just download them. And I started cutting them out, and I had this ridiculous wall in my studio that was like, I mean, anybody who walked in was like, what are you doing? You know, it's like, and because the images they use are also just like really intense. And, but it was very cathartic for me, because, you know, it helped me kind of work out some of the things that I had experienced, when I had my 2 abortions. We kind of workshopped the film through the collective, and everybody who crewed on the film was part of the collective, and the casting process happened collectively. So it was like even though, you know, it was kind of my vision, it was really done through the support of this amazing organization and amazing group of people, and it would have never happened without them. And I think the casting process was also really, really interesting, because I had never done a casting process before. So for one, it was like totally new to me, but also to see, you know, the personal experiences that different people involved brought to the roles and why they were interested, and how game they were, because it's, you know, it's not a straightforward piece, I would say, even though I think it's a very affecting piece. It kind of uses the language of science fiction, and you don't really, the audience doesn't understand that that the script is verbatim from these pamphlets until the very end. So a little bit we're like leading them to believe that this is a future world when really it's what's happening right now in a lot of places. And the car is kind of looked at as the extension of the body. And so there's like a lot of symbolism and metaphor, but people were really down with it. And it was a lot of fun. It was also the only cold day in January of 2020, which was like a balmy month in New York. And then when the day we were going to shoot it was like icy and freezing. And of course, yeah. So, I mean, for me, it was a really amazing process because it's so different to create a world through fiction than to document a world, even though that there's so much kind of creation and to a certain effect manipulation and everything that happens in documentary. It felt so different to kind of do it from the beginning in a fiction film. And for me, because this film was so personal, it was really freeing to make it like outside of my body and outside of my experience, even though it very much was reflective of that.
Yeah. I personally tend to work more in the fiction space and have so much respect for documentarians because it is like, they're just such different mediums. The result is like, you know, something that you can share and show and moves people and changes hearts and minds and all of that. But the process, yes, is so different. And really beautiful, like exciting that you were able to kind of meld those two things and also to work in this collective of people, because the fight for RJ is necessarily a collective fight. And so the fact that, you know, folks are like, hell yeah, and like we're on board and sort of jumping in with you. I love to hear that. I have a really quick question. And actually, Sarah, after you spoke, it totally applies. But it's sort of like, did Ale or Pamela or any of the participants or any of the folks in your collective, Sarah, like, did they have say on sort of the story? Like, were they in the edit with you? Were they kind of a part of that process, or you built that like amazing trust and then were sort of like, I'm going to go and I'm going to make this story, and then, you know, brought it back to them and sort of were like, okay, great. Now like, let's use this. Let's leverage this. Like, let's take this out into the world. And whoever wants to dive in and start.
Yeah, I can start. So she wasn't so much in the edit with us, but what I did want to do, just because her case is changing so much, and for those who, hopefully you will watch the film in the festival, but for those who don't know, it's really following her deportation case and her fighting for political asylum. But her cases and the charges in the past are always kind of fluctuating. So we wanted to make sure that there were like no incriminating details that like she might have said in the past that like could, you know, harm her. So I did show her like an earlier cut of the film when we were kind of doing a work in progress screening at the Jacob Burns Film Center. And so she had a say on like, actually, like, I can't really say too much about, you know, my DUIs or like all the details in DUIs. And like, I was like, that's fine. That's not really what this story is about, right? We're not trying to go through like all of her arrests and everything that happened. So in that way, yes, like she did have a say. But we, made sure after like we had cut a very different film in the beginning, and like now it is very different. But she has seen it and really does like it. So I think we were able to just over time, build that trust and make sure that she felt comfortable with what was going in, and ultimately she did trust us in the end to like put out what we put out. So yeah, it ended up working out.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. The Pam and the other participants in the class they weren't there in the edit process, partly because Jesse and I were my co-director were getting our MFAs from Stanford in documentary at the time, and they make the turnaround for our films like really fast, like 3 weeks out of the movie. So it wasn't totally feasible. And also the class was filmed in LA, and we were in Northern California, so like there's logistics that made it very challenging. But we were super open about if there's anything first everyone knew that at any point if there's anything they didn't want filmed, that we wouldn't film it. And there were people that through the course of the evening expressed that they didn't want to be in the film, or they didn't want parts of their participation to be in the film. And so some of that like editorial control came in like during the shooting process. Like there's one woman who had been a sex worker in the past and spoke about that, but she has kids now and she's no longer a sex worker, and she didn't want anyone in her family to know, and that's like totally understandable. And so we're like, yeah, we're not putting you in the film. And there's a few other people who for their own reasons didn't feel comfortable, and so we didn't include them. And we also, everyone had our contact information, and we made it very clear that if after this night is over, if you have feeling any uncertainty or discomfort about like what you shared and you don't want it to be in the film, then we'll remove it. So they didn't get a say in the edit exactly, but they were in full control of like what would and would not make it into the film.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it is always I think that's sort of like one of those ethical things that you grapple with always as a filmmaker, and you always hope that the people you're making film about love it. And even if it's a complicated portrait, that they understand that, at least for me, like all my films are always coming from a place of like deep love and respect for the people who I work with. So, and everyone in the film ended up really loving it, and we haven't had any problems. But yeah, it's something I think about often.
Yeah, it is such a like a deep kind of fundamental foundational question in filmmaking, and honestly, like in fictional filmmaking too, when the stories that we like write and create end up being something that we're drawing from our own lives or from our own experiences, or all of that stuff. So Sarah, how did the collective engage with like the post-production process? Like, were they involved? How does that look?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say even before I get to that, just thinking about collaborations and the actors too. It was one thing that was really interesting during the rehearsal process. We asked them to come with backstories for the characters that they had written, which is like I guess a standard thing that people do. But they wrote these like amazing backstories that went like, far beyond the script, and shared them with each other. And I think that really impacted the way that they related to each other on screen. And they kind of in some ways wrote the relationships that are visible in the final film through those backstories. And then in the editing process, we had like 5 editors on this film. Like we just kept handing it off, to each other. And I think I ended up, Alessandra and I really ended up finishing the final edit, but it was like, it went through like 5 different collective members worked on it. And we workshopped multiple edits in feedback sessions through the collective. So it was very much, again, shaped by the brain trust of the collective.
That's so exciting. I just really, I think that's so like cool. And again, like it's such a collective fight. And so the fact that it was like a collective creation process is so exciting. And it's like a perfect segue into the question of representation of reproductive experience in the media. I think, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your own personal story. And I've also had an abortion, and that's very much what drives me to tell stories of reproductive experience in my work. And Aurora, you shared a little bit about kind of how you found about this class, but I'm just curious, like, what is the driver to tell reproductive experience, stories of reproductive experience, of reproductive liberation, of reproductive, in some cases, trauma. What is the calling to tell those stories in a film form? And Maya, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a time where things unfortunately are getting worse around reproductive rights. We're going backwards. I'm someone who was obviously born after Roe v. Wade, but it just feels like not much has changed from, the elders I talked to versus like what we're experiencing now. And I think in terms of Ale's story, like what's really interesting about her is that there's a lot of intersections with reproductive healthcare and reproductive justice and immigrant rights, right? Like we need to talk more about how, family separation or being deported and all these things is a reproductive justice issue, right? And Ale in the film even talks about this, like she's really an advocate for abortion rights, having, had abortions herself, and is a reproductive justice organizer. And she talks about like, if she were deported to Mexico, like she could be in real danger because she's very, outspoken about abortion rights, right? And abortion is virtually illegal in Mexico, right? So she really talks about how like, in many ways, she's fighting for political asylum because like there's a lot of danger for her to be in an area that, she could be hurt if, she's outspoken about, reproductive rights. So I feel that it's really important that we, make those intersections. And as well as, I'm in my feature documentary that's also going to be featured in this festival on the Divide, that's following 3 Latinx people who are all connected to the last abortion clinic on the US-Mexico border. So these are also issues that like we're not thinking about, right? Like who are the people that are on the ground, right? Really having to face the brunt of these issues, and if access is taken away, they're the ones who are going to have to deal with, what does choice mean when you don't have many options, right? And so I think for me in my storytelling, I really always try to make sure that we're showing like the unlikely faces that are kind of in the fight around reproductive healthcare, and like show how complex they are, and really again like talk about these intersections, because I don't think we're, at least as like a Latina filmmaker, I'm not seeing enough Latinx voices being kind of at the forefront of this issue, right? It's like a lot of women that are like white women that are often highlighted and kind of at the forefront, but it's like, hey, there's a lot of brown and Black people who are really dealing with this, head on, and like have to deal, they get like, if there's access is stripped, they're going to be the ones that have, the most consequences dealing with that. So I just feel that like going back to Ale's story, that's why it was really important for me to like highlight that she is also an abortion rights activist, dealing with all of these issues, as well as immigrant rights activist.
Yeah, I think, reproductive justice seems to be like, I have not yet found a single other issue that doesn't intersect with reproductive justice. It is sort of one of the most inherently intersectional kind of issues and concerns and like conversations that can be had. So that totally makes sense and is powerful. Thank you. Sarah, I'll kick that to you. You've had your own personal experiences, but maybe the question is like, why film? Why storytelling? Like, how do you see these two things kind of meeting each other, the art and the access?
Yeah, it's such a big question. It's and I guess it's so interesting for me because reproductive justice has been such a big part of my life, but it hasn't really come into my filmmaking until now. And now I'm just kind of like, oh my God, I need to do more. I need to make more. And like, I think part of that is just like, it's something that on so many levels has deeply impacted me personally. And so, like kind of working out these experiences on film and through art making has been very cathartic, and kind of like working through the trauma, I think, is really important. I think also I really agree with everything that Maya said so much. I think I'm really I'm really invested in intersectional storytelling, intersectional politics, and I want to see it on screen. I want to see the ways all of these fights connect. It was also something we were thinking about a lot with In Accordance With, because these Women's Rights to Know Act and restrictive laws on abortion in this country, in fact, impact women with less money and Black and brown women so much more than white middle class and upper class women. And so it's something that I just think it's just so important. And I think another thing that for me is just like taking up the space. Like, I love so much Aurora, like your film. I'm just like, I can't wait to see it, because I'm like so excited to see women enjoying their bodies take up space on screen. Like that's something that, and I feel like the more we can show that too, like that also feeds the political struggle and our like empowerment to keep fighting to be able to like have body liberation in all these spaces. And so I guess I just I'm so thrilled to be here with the two of you, and what Repro is doing and creating these spaces, and I just want to see more of it.
Yeah, the reproductive joy is such a piece of the puzzle in mainstream media that's missed. Like, both, whether it's like connecting and sharing about having had a certain experience and like the liberation that comes from being able to make a choice about your own future, like just all, like there's just so much play and happiness and feminism in it and in sharing and in talking about it. And like the shame and the stigma is designed to keep it quiet, to keep us all kind of quiet. So in the name of joy, Aurora, what brought you to decide to tell this story? Like, why were you like, I want to make a film about Repro?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because initially we were actually not as interested in making a film about this class, but we knew that there were people, I want to be careful what I say, similar individuals, kind of overlapping communities with this group, where there's a group of people who are teaching other people with vaginas how to induce their own abortions, so that if there were ever to come a time when abortion access was impossible or very difficult, that they would have the knowledge and skills to induce their own abortions. And that is highly illegal and very sensitive, and we didn't want to ruin anyone's life, so we did not pursue that avenue. But this class is in a very similar vein as that mission, which is about like returning, empowering people with the knowledge of how their own bodies work and how to care for their own bodies. And so, like there's so much, I think, even as like people with vaginas, that we don't understand about how our own bodies work. And I found this experience even when I go to the gynecologist, where I'm like, there's like an issue down there and it's been going on forever. And they're like, well, I don't know, take these antibiotics. And I'm like, literally, I've been doing this for years and it's not working. And it's sort of like mind-boggling that like but has medicine not advanced? Are people not listening? Like, I don't understand. And so this class is very much about like returning, like empowering people with knowledge of how to take care of their bodies, how to identify when something's wrong, how to identify when things feel good. Like, it was very much about that. And also like for people who maybe feel incredibly uncomfortable going to the doctor, like potentially for like trans or non-binary people who enter like the gynecologist and that's just like not a comfortable space for them. Like, how can they do their own self-examinations? Or so the class, like a big part of the class that you don't see in the film is like sort of like a medical sort of thing, like teaching you how to care for your own body, but simultaneously also sort of dispelling a lot of myths about bodies and like vagina bodies, because obviously not everyone with a vagina is a woman, and the class is very conscious of that, and not everyone who attended the class, even in the night that we filmed Identified as a Woman, so I wanted to be inclusive of that, and sort of like where these myths come from, like. And I learned a lot, frankly. Like there's like the one image of a vagina that I think and a vulva that we're all most like used to seeing, and it's sort of like you probably saw it when you were growing up. It's like a vagina and or the vulva and the opening to the vagina is like kind of open, and it's like a little bit like and I remember always thinking like mine doesn't look like that, and Pam taught the class like the reason why that looks that way is because that was actually like from like the 1920s. It was a dead 80-year-old white woman's cadaver, and they're actually like little pins that are like pulling the opening to her vulva, like to her vagina open, and that's why it looks like that. But all of us, like in sex ed, and even every doctor is trained on this one like rendition of this woman's vagina. And there's so many things like that doesn't account for like, well, one, what a body looks like when it's alive, and also what a body looks like when it's not like 70 or 80 years old, and when you're not white, and all these different factors. And so the class is so much about like showing us the range of what bodies can look like, and to normalize bodies. And like if you're not someone who sleeps with other people with vaginas, you probably haven't seen them. And if you are someone, you've only seen it in a sexual context, and that is also like very different than understanding what's like a non-aroused, just like regular looking vulva and vagina look like. So part of it was like really wanting to like give people who don't have access to this kind of class some of this knowledge, although of course it's super condensed in the film, and also like just that we don't see vaginas. And the class is all about like the whole idea of the gallery that destroys all shame is like this is a place where shame is destroyed, and we want the film to also be a place where shame is destroyed. And that's why it was so important to us that we like included a vagina. And it's been kind of sad because unfortunately, because of the inclusion of the vagina, it's been really hard, or the vulva, I'm sorry, some people like vulva, vagina, sorry, the vulva, I guess. We haven't really been able to show the film that many places because it gets censored. So no streaming platform will take it. Some film festivals won't take it. A lot of film festivals, if we've been included, like they like really censor like our little trailer, because there's even like suggestive material that maybe someone's like we're like sort of looking at a vagina, even if there is no vagina. So that's been super disappointing because I feel like I see dicks in movies all the time. But when last, like everyone's pulling out a dick and like doing something, like in every like raunchy comedy, there's like a scene with a dick. But when have you ever seen full frontal vagina? Like never seen it. And so we also felt really strongly like we are putting this in there. And so yeah, we wanted it to be like an educational tool, and also like some place to sort of like feel like you're a film where you could sort of like hear the taboo things that you've never been able to say out loud, expressed by other people, and heard and shared and like really welcomed. And then also the film itself has like a really sort of like radical act of like, we're gonna put a vagina in this movie, and hopefully someone watches it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like when you were just saying that, I was watching White Lotus, which is this show on HBO that everybody's talking about, and there is a full frontal like balls and shaft like that you see in episode 1, I think. Anyway, and it was so shocking to me to see that, as compared to watching your film, where it's not shocking at all. It's so beautiful. It's such the natural progression of this class, which I imagine, probably was somewhat what it was like to be there and to experience that, which, I think at the beginning, at the top, you were sort of talking about that was one of the goals, was to sort of film as if you were a participant as opposed to a voyeur into it. But it's just like, I think, it's such a sign of the work to do and of how important all of your films are, because it only will change when the commitment is made to tell stories in this way, and with a feminist lens and with an intersectional lens, all of the different sort of things at play. So thank you all. I mean, I could do this all day, but we have a time limit. So if there is like one little like nugget of wisdom or something that you learned in your process, something that the folks watching can take away, like a quick sort of sentence or two, what might that be? And Sarah, let's start with you.
I don't know. I guess just play, enjoy it, enjoy the process, and be fierce.
Beautiful. Maya?
I think I want people to just see it and see what they take away from it. But I think a question that we really went into this process of filmmaking with was, looking at like who has the privilege to make mistakes, right? And what does it really mean to, quote unquote, deserve or belong to stay in this country? And I think that there's a lot of things that happen in this film that will hopefully, change people's minds about just being like what they think of as a criminal, right? And I think that Ale's story can really speak to like how we need to put blame back on the system, rather than people who might have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. And is there a place that people can learn more about Ale's campaign?
Yes,
If
thank
they're
you for
interested.
bringing that up. Yeah, so there's her website is called keepalefree.org, and this is basically her deportation defense campaign. So this is where if you, after watching the film, are really motivated to, want to do more and try to support her, there's a place to donate to her to make sure that she's able to stay here. And then also she has other organizing efforts on there as well that you can support. So it's keepalefree.org.
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, great. And Aurora, to bring us home.
Yeah, it has to be good. I just hope that the film, I don't know, I hope that it helps to chip away at some of the shame that we all carry. Even if you feel like you're the most enlightened, I think it's just so deeply ingrained in our society that we all feel inherent shame around our bodies, and it gets reinforced all the time, and that it can just be a valuable tool to help people feel a little bit more comfortable in sharing more openly about their experiences with their bodies, and knowing that they're not alone in those experiences, even if they hadn't heard other people talk about them in the past. And I guess if you're inspired to attend one of the classes, one of the amazing things, one outcome of the pandemic is the classes now happen over Zoom sometimes. So if you have any interest in doing this over Zoom, the woman who runs the class, her Instagram is called Embody Work LA, like body work, but Embody Work LA. And people from like around the world now attend these classes, and she even like creates little like speculum like pickup stations in like major cities where you could like, they'll be like, I don't know how she does this, but you can like go to the street and like there'll be like a bag of speculums waiting there for you to like to take it home for the class. So I highly recommend checking it out.
So cool. I love that. Sarah, what is a final nugget of wisdom that you want to share with the audience?
I think, we made this film just so that people could really see and understand how these laws are impacting pregnant people on a regular basis, what it feels like to be inside that body as it's experiencing this language, and how, how intimidating, coercive, and shameful it can be, and how important it is to go through this process with somebody supporting you. And we hope that, people watching the film will understand that this is happening now, that it may not be happening where they live, but that it may be happening in the next state over, and that there are a lot of organizations that are out there that are specifically helping pregnant people access the support that they need in safe psychologically and physically ways.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for sharing your films and for sharing your beautiful words and your beautiful faces. It was such a joy and such a pleasure. So huge thank you to all of you, and also to the audience for participating in this call to action roundtable discussion. all of you who have joined today, you three as these incredible filmmakers, and also all of the audience members who are listening in. You are all playing an active role in the movement for change. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.